Spider-Man has been part of popular culture for more than 60 years. Yet every successful version begins with the same simple question. What happens when an ordinary young person receives extraordinary power, but none of life's ordinary problems disappear? That question still matters in Spider-Man: Brand New Day, the newest film starring Tom Holland. This episode is completely spoiler-free. We will briefly trace how Spider-Man changed, then focus on what makes this new chapter worth watching. Spider-Man first appeared in a Marvel comic in 1962. At the time, teenage characters were usually assistants to older heroes. Peter Parker was different because he carried the whole story himself. He worried about school, money, family, friendship, and whether people liked him. His powers made his life more exciting, but they also made it more complicated. That balance became the character's foundation. Spider-Man could move above the city, but emotionally, he remained close to the people living below. He was powerful enough to save strangers and human enough to arrive late, make mistakes, and feel guilty. The movies kept returning to that contrast. Tobey Maguire's version emphasized responsibility, sacrifice, and the loneliness behind the mask. Andrew Garfield brought more speed, nervous energy, and emotional openness. Tom Holland entered a much larger superhero world, surrounded by advanced technology and famous allies. That scale was exciting, but it also changed the basic feeling of a Spider-Man story. Instead of being alone with a homemade solution, Peter often had access to a much bigger system. Brand New Day is interesting because it asks what remains when much of that support is gone. The official starting point is simple. The world no longer remembers Peter Parker. Spider-Man still exists, but Peter's personal connections no longer work in the same way. That premise creates the first major viewing point. Watch the distance between the hero and the person inside the suit. In many superhero films, the costume represents freedom. Here, it can also represent the one identity Peter still knows how to use. Pay attention to the quiet moments before and after the large action scenes. The important question is not only whether Spider-Man can stop danger. It is whether Peter can build a meaningful life when nobody shares his memory of the past. The second viewing point is the film's sense of scale. Recent Spider-Man stories have crossed universes and brought together different versions of the hero. Brand New Day has been widely described as more grounded and more mature. Grounded does not mean small or visually boring. It means that the action feels connected to streets, rooms, relationships, and choices we can understand. Watch how New York functions as more than a background. Spider-Man is at his best when the city feels crowded, difficult, and worth protecting. A rooftop can feel as important as a giant battlefield when the story gives it personal meaning. The third point is movement. Each live-action Spider-Man has moved differently, and those differences reveal personality. Some movements look careful and controlled, while others feel improvised and almost desperate. Notice how Tom Holland uses posture, hesitation, and speed to show Peter's state of mind. The strongest action is not simply fast. It tells us what the character is thinking before he has time to say it. The fourth point is the relationship between nostalgia and a fresh start. Spider-Man now carries decades of famous images, lines, poses, and audience expectations. A new film can easily become a museum of familiar references. Brand New Day is more rewarding if you watch how it uses the past without depending entirely on it. You do not need to recognize every reference. Instead, ask whether an old idea has been given a new emotional purpose. That is the difference between simple nostalgia and meaningful continuity. The fifth viewing point is Tom Holland's performance as an older and more isolated Peter. His earlier films often showed Peter reacting quickly to adults, friends, and larger events around him. This time, the more interesting moments come when he has to choose a direction without that safety net. Watch his face when Peter decides what not to say. Watch how he behaves around people who matter to him, even when their relationship to him has changed. The emotional tension often comes from information Peter carries alone. That makes restraint as important as spectacle. So, do you need to remember every earlier Marvel film before watching Brand New Day? No. It helps to know that Peter has lost the shared life he once had with his closest friends. Beyond that, the essential idea is the same one that made Spider-Man work in 1962. Power does not remove ordinary problems. It makes every ordinary choice carry more weight. My spoiler-free recommendation is to watch the film as a character story first and a connected universe story second. Notice the city, the physical performance, the quiet decisions, and the tension between memory and identity. Those details explain why Spider-Man can change across generations without losing his center. The suit can change, the actors can change, and the world around Peter can become much larger. But the story still works when a young man must decide what responsibility means today. That's all for today's episode. Spider-Man lasts because every new beginning gives Peter Parker another chance to answer the same difficult question. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
For the full script and fresh daily news English, visit atozpodcast.com. Follow every line, check useful expressions, practice speaking, and come back each day to turn today's stories into English you can use.